Introducing our guest this week, good friend of mine, fellow Clevelander, former COO of CrossCountry Mortgage, former president and COO of Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, now started her own firm, Danda Road, where she's doing a lot of consulting within the mortgage industry, mortgage lenders, a lot of different things, strategy, tech, working with some tech vendors. Somebody that's as dialed in to the mortgage tech world as anybody I know, and we wanted to have her on this week, my good friend, Jodi Hall. Jodi, great to see you.
Awesome. Thanks for the invite. Always great to catch up with both you and Rob.
Should be fun, should be fun. And as always, any questions, comments, pump them into the chat, to the Q&A, and we will incorporate it into the show. We did have
Isn't there a question already?
There's an anonymous attendee said, I think Rob should hit the leave button. So Rob, it must be a Clevelander that wants an all Cleveland show this week, maybe. So, but yeah, so. But well, Rob, let's go ahead and get into it. And like to start the big picture with the big picture. And we've got now a series of positive for the mortgage industry economic reports. CPI yesterday, which was tamer than expected. The Fed policy statement and press conference, which the market reacted positively to. Then this morning, we get very positive PPI data, actually showed a decrease in the cost of producer prices month over month, another inflation dampening positive number. And then now we're cheering for bad jobs data. So, jobless claims, first time jobless claims higher than expected by about 20K. So a series of good reports as such. Mortgage rates down now, 30-year rates in the 6.6, 6.7 range. We've gotten a little relief. Fool's gold, Rob, or are we getting somewhere here?
So did another question pop up having to do with this?
And it did, yeah. Bernard, our friend Bernard from iEmergent. Does anyone actually foresee the Fed cutting rates at all this year before the election? Thoughts whenever you get to it. So kind of tied into my question.
Yeah. So first of all, we'll try to leave politics out of this, but it's going to get harder and harder to leave politics out of things. The U.S. economy is doing very well, despite what a potential presidential candidate might say. We're pumping more oil than we have. The consumer is strong. Yeah, rates are higher, but things are going very well. Certainly not in any kind of recessionary track. And so if you think to yourself, well, why does the Fed have to cut interest rates? Because the economy is starting to drag. And jobless claims, yeah, they were whatever they were, 242 or 225 or whatever it might have been. It's been relatively steady. Home prices have been gradually doing better. There are some pockets of housing prices that are going up and down with more volatility, like Phoenix or Austin or South Florida, but overall the economy is doing pretty well. So really, the Fed doesn't have to cut rates. They don't want to. There's no reason to stimulate the economy at this point. And Rich, you're right. 30-year rates have come down. The bond prices have gone up, and so that's certainly nice to see. The CPI, the PPI, and so forth, everything's kind of behaving, and it's nice to see. And I was telling an audience yesterday, the day before in Sarasota, that you hear people talking about, a hard landing or a soft landing. People have to remember that when you're dealing with the U.S. economy, there's no landing per se. Right? I mean, the economy just keeps going along. It's not like landing a plane and coming to a stop. The economy keeps moving forward. And right now, given the news this week, given the unemployment data, the economy is behaving. So at this point, I don't personally see a lot of reason to stimulate the economy by a Fed rate cut, but the odds are very good that at some point they will cut rates. And when that happens, I think it'll be fully expected. We'll have had 2 or 3 months of data that shows, inflation maybe being under control, maybe unemployment starting to creep up a little bit, maybe housing prices are stagnating, some signs that maybe some parts of the economy are slowing a little bit. But Rich, you've heard me use this analogy dozens and dozens of times. I mean, you walk down the street or you go into a restaurant. I mean, the economy is doing pretty well. And there's a hum out there. It's not like certainly during the pandemic when everybody was shut in and nobody was spending money except trying to hoard toilet paper. And we're in a different environment now where things are going okay. So I think the market, the more data, obviously we get new data every month, every week, but the data's been pretty good. And if we kind of can continue along here, maybe we'll see a cut in short-term rates, later on, but certainly it's not the expectations that we had or some people had earlier this year that there were going to be 3 or 4 rate cuts by year end. I mean, right now, I think Goldman Sachs is predicting 1 or 2 rate cuts by year end. Some of the other firms are as well. So the economy is doing okay. And the question comes back to what are lenders doing about, if rates were to chop around here for the next 2 or 3, 4 months, what kind of programs are they offering borrowers? So I sounded like a broken record a little bit, but
no, you've been as on mark on all this as anybody, as we've gone through these last few years since the pandemic, trying to get the economy back on track. And Jodi, it's kind of a precarious time for mortgage lenders right now, just at least from my end of the world and the lenders I'm working with. It's, everybody goes into the spring every year, regardless of what the hell's going on, with, hopes and expectations. And this spring was just a big pile of doggy doo-doo. But now I think we're starting to see some signs of hope and positivity. How have you seen, at least from your world, how that has translated, if at all, to lenders starting to invest in their own companies again? And I just would be curious, any other trends you're seeing with lender clients that you're working with right now?
I really think what happened after, 2022, after 21 and 22, and we started to see in 2023, some lenders starting to really struggle. Everything that they had thrown, including the kitchen sink, at creating efficiency to try to deal with the amount of business that was out there, they came down to, I need a CRM, I need a point of sale or LOS, and I need to have servicing, and I need a pricing engine. And anything outside of that was game for being ripped out. Because the need to cut cost. And we even saw people going back to manual processes of, waiting until a loan was ready to go to an underwriter and then having someone call human resources at an employer and try to fax over. Well, maybe they didn't fax, but it seemed that as though it was that archaic to get a written verification of employment completed because the cost of verifications have gone up. We saw a little bit of a increase in applications, and I've already started to hear the noise of the lenders taking the spin like, I don't know how I'm going to keep up if there is a significant reduction in interest rate and a significant increase in applications to be able to handle the business. So some of the efficiencies that we had put into place to deal with the amount of business that we had during the pandemic is we now have to start looking at putting back in. And I do think that some of the lenders are going to wait until it's too late. Like their heads are almost buried in the sand, the fact that this is a time to be building the processes to be able to grow. And I also think that now is the time to have those negotiations with your vendor partners who are empathetic to the fact of where business was and having the opportunity to grow, that they're willing to write contracts that are going to be a little more, a little more appealing to the lender side than they were during those booms. So I really think some people are going to miss the boat, but the lenders who are going to do really well are those who have been looking at those processes and looking for ways to drive down cost and through efficiency, and not necessarily just, going out and employing every shiny new object that popped onto the mortgage tech scene.
I mean, we're at the point right now, Rob, where with rates and like the 6.6, 6.7. I mean, if rates were to go into even the high fives, I feel like we'd see a huge crush of business. I mean, this apps were up to Jodi's point, 16% week over week last week, and that was going from like 7.3 to like 7% or 7.1 on a 30-year fixed. We'll see how the app stats look next week with this week's additional rate relief, but I mean, my sense is that we would see a big boon of business if we got another 3/8.5% even from where we are.
Yeah, certainly a lot of the folks who bought when rates were 7.5 or 8, maybe even higher with some loan level price adjustments. The industry has gotten incredibly good at mining its own database in terms of, if I'm a wholesaler, whoever I am, and I sell my loan to Freedom or broker my loan to Freedom. I mean, Freedom wants that servicing not for the $10 or $20 a month that it earns. They're going to be looking at that loan. They want that client, and they're going to be looking at interest rates, and they're going to be on top of that client, arguably much better than the original originator of that loan. And so the borrowers out there will be very aware, depending on who owns their servicing, of where rates are. And yeah, we could see a very nice pickup. But you can also make the argument that we weren't doing a tremendous amount of volume when rates were 7, 7.5, 8, 7.5 or 8. And so I haven't actually looked at the stats lately to find out what percent of the overall pie is in that 7.5 to 8% range. Nor have I seen, I mean, this is a relatively sudden move in terms of 30-year rates. And so it may take investors a while to get the 102s or 103s on the rate sheet again. And so for borrowers to call up a borrower and say, hey, I know we did your loan at 7 5/8 and your kind of loan, we're down at 6 3/4, but you have to pay 2 points. Yeah, I don't know if borrowers are quite there yet, where they'd want to pay, maybe, depending on how long they're going to stay in the home. But it is nice to see. And this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Rich, or the earlier question. When you look at potential interest rate changes, so many times when the Fed makes a move, the bond market, which includes the mortgage-backed security market, the bond market is already there. It's already waiting for that rate change, whether it's up or down. And so sometimes when the Fed moves, not only is expected, but the bond market is already there. So when the Fed actually does make a change, there's not a lot of movement. So, I think a lot of the bond analysts and investors are thinking, yeah, this is a nice little bit of good news. We're always looking at more data. So here we are. And you're right, if rates continue to head through the 6s, we could see some nice refi numbers. That's nice to see. And then everyone will say, aren't we glad we held on to our key employees and we didn't lay them off like we wanted to do in March or April? Aren't we glad we held on to these people? So yeah,
Jodi,
just never know.
Jodi, two-part question for you. We all remember what happened summer and fall of 2020, the crush of business. Lenders, just started hiring everybody. It was just a massive wave of hiring and because of all the business that resulted. So two-part question. One, where do you feel like the mortgage industry is today vis-a-vis summer, fall of 2020 in terms of needing to add bodies to cover business? And then two, what are the notable, from your perspective, advances in tech that will maybe make that less painful for lenders?
Well, I don't think that anybody held on to all of their people from 2020 and 2021. We've seen a significant number, and I don't think it's been insulated just to smaller mid-sized lenders. It has been everyone. It has been credit unions. It has been depositories. It has been IMBs have all had to make difficult decisions to make cuts. I don't think anyone is at the same level. Some may be overstaffed for the amount of production that they have today, trying to guard against that. But my hope is, and I do believe that the lenders that are going to be most successful and are going to be able to continue to grow and to take over market share of those who have put technology in place so that they can have the accordion effect in the technology. You know, the technology is on 24/7, and people can go on vacation and you can turn that technology up to handle the business, or in times when there isn't the business and you want to keep your people employed, then you just turn down the technology for that given period of time. So I do think that there's been a lot of work that has been done where, and people at least are saying, I don't want to be there again. And so they're forward enough thinking to employ technology. Technologies that we see that are able to do that are, you know, with AI underwriting and being able to get more productivity. We do know that from 2020 and 2021, one of the biggest complaints, I mean, we had lenders that were, and even some of the correspondent investors who their turn times to review loans were 30 days. Like, can you imagine, like, even going back to having a loan sitting for initial underwriting for more than 48 hours? Like, underwriters have been sitting there waiting to underwrite. So that's one of the examples of that. What we have seen happen also is that because of the cost of the verifications, we have seen that go deeper into the process, and we're finding out later in the process that maybe someone doesn't qualify when you go to verify income or verify assets. So I think what will naturally happen is we'll go back to that very forward in the loan process, hopefully within, and people should be working towards this now to have it available when there is an increase in applications, but able to automatically turn on those verifications so that they are, as data is completed within the point of sale, your verification of income, and hopefully getting day one certainty and AIM validations, that is happening early in the process. I think there's also been a push to get those verifications of self-employed income through the 8821s. I think that we'll start to see those happening very early in the process, but I think that is kind of like dry powder for the lenders to be able to deploy when they start to see those hikes, so we don't have people that are calling employers to get verifications or calling for verifications of deposit and doing a lot of manual work.
Something I'd like to get both your thoughts on, and Rob, I'll start with you. Just the competitive balance of the force here in the mortgage industry. Envisioning a situation where volume, picks up and goes to a different place where it's been for the last 2.5 years. Rob, right now, I mean, depositories used to do 70-75% of the business in mortgage lending and go back 15-20 years. Now it's kind of independent mortgage bankers are doing about 70%, at least last year. How do you see, Rob, the competitive balance settling out, shaking out in the mortgage industry when we return to a more normal volume cycle?
Is there a normal volume cycle?
I mean, envision, 6% rates and, a year where we do, 2.3 trillion instead of 1.3.
Rich, if we get to like the low sixes, then people will be clamoring for the high fives, and in the high fives, they'll want low fives. The competitive landscape, that's a very complicated question, far above my pay grade to answer. But I will say this: if you look back, and every once in a while I publish like the top lenders from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You go back 20 years, I mean, virtually like almost nobody in the top 5 now were in the top 20 years ago, for example. Maybe a couple firms. And those firms are the banks. Wells City, Chase, B of A, US Bank, Nat City, whatever it might be, Fifth Third, not Nat City, but Fifth Third, SunTrust, now Truist. I mean, those banks tend to have more staying power than other non-bank IMBs. That being said, you have a very savvy group of non-bank IMB owners that I wouldn't bet against. If you look at the CEOs or the owners of, the Freedoms and the CMGs and the Union Homes and so on down,
Your guy Ishbia. Your guy
what's
Ishbia.
that?
Your guy Ishbia.
Exactly. I'm not going to bet against Matt trying to survive, because remember that IMBs, for the most part, their whole pie is mortgages, whereas banks have other sources of revenue that they can fall back on or adjust things. And so they have that going for them. But yeah, the IMBs, I mean, it's kind of like it's their only game, and they're going to be more competitive. And so I wouldn't bet against that. But in terms of the overall competitive landscape, I think if you look at the long term, banks are still, a good place to be. But then you look at Wells Fargo, who got out of wholesale several years ago, and then got out of correspondent a few years ago, and now they're relying solely on their branch network. But they have the ability to come back at some point and open up another channel, whereas an IMB does not have the ability, generally speaking, to open up a bank or open up, auto lending or whatever it might be. Some of that's going on, but not greatly. So yeah, I'd say the competitive landscape over dozens of years, decades, favors banks historically. I don't see that changing a lot, but certainly right now, the IMBs are doing very well.
Jodi, competitive landscape thoughts?
I have statistics. I haven't deeply researched it to find out what it means, but from 2022 to 2023, there was about a 6% decrease in the number of IMBs and over a 15% increase in the number of credit unions and banks. What does it mean? I don't know. And we don't have 2023's data coming out to know like where we're going to end up. Like, is that continuing to increase, or for credit unions and banks, and decrease for IMBs as we get closer, we'll know more. I don't know why that is, but what I will say is having clients as credit unions and banks, and having been in the IMB world, IMBs know how to retain customers and mine their database at a far greater sophistication than we see in credit unions and in banks. And that's not a superiority complex because I come from IMB world. It's just an observation, which is, it's an area of opportunity that if they can figure that out, then they're going to continue to grow. And then it's less cyclical in their ability to be profitable and to survive through downturns in the market.
And Jodi, follow-up question to something we talked about earlier. I think regardless of how, bullish you are on mortgage tech right now, I think we would all argue that we thought mortgage tech would be, if you would have asked us 10 years ago and 5 years ago where tech would be today in summer of 2024, we all would have thought it would be further along than it is currently. Where did mortgage tech get it most wrong? When all the POSs and all the newfangled stuff started popping up 8 to 10 years ago?
I think it's that there was a single approach for solving problems that, the tech companies said, I'm going to solve this one thing. So I'm going to solve W-2 income verification. I'm going to completely forget about self-employed income verification. I'm going to only calculate self-employed income. I'm not going to calculate W-2. And what it created was lenders having to layer technology on top of legacy technology and not having holistic fixes to problems. And, many lenders are busy running their business and they don't have the ability to deeply research what technology is out there. Maybe it's even the technology that they already have that can actually solve the problem that they have. But I think the technology companies they're going and building without a lender's perspective. And I think that's starting to change where a lot of the mortgage technology companies realize that they need an insider, they need a lending advisor, or they need to have close relationships with lenders that are willing to give them advice on what the problems are that they should be solving. But I think the biggest miss is just solving little tiny pieces of the problem to layer on top of big technology. Now that helps with change management, but it makes because you keep your big core technologies and you can layer those on. But at the same time, it's like, why do I have to have 5 different contracts just for verification of employment or income calculation? Why isn't there a single technology that solves all of those pieces for me? And while you're there, why don't you do all types of verifications? Why don't you also bring in the fees and the credit? So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. The other thing, and we talked about this, and a trend that I'm seeing to shift, when we talk about retention, we didn't do anything with servicing. Like, servicing doesn't appear to have advanced. Even if you're good at retention, you're not good at bringing the data that you already have on your existing customer forward. So you're asking your existing client the questions to get answers of information you already should know. So I do think that we're starting to see some tech players that are focusing on servicing, and not just like streamlining the interim servicing and the handling of servicing, but also that retention piece and being able to extract the data within the servicing, the information you already know, and putting that forward to consumers to be able to say, oh yeah, that is my information. Yeah, that's still correct. So they're not starting from square one every time that they engage with you, who should already know them.
Great points. And Rob, it was one of just siloed technology, and getting tech to work, either be more holistic, to Jodi's point, or work more seamlessly with other providers. Some of that could have been because you had one big LOS provider with like 50-60% market share. You kind of have to go in and out of the LOS. Realistically, I think that was kind of part of it. I think one of the worst things that could happen for mortgage tech, Rob, is just having an LOS provider with such dominant market share, where maybe they could kind of set the rules a little bit. Do you feel like that might have played into the lack of tech advancement in mortgage comparative to expectation?
To some extent, or if obviously when you add technology, you want it, whatever you're adding has to be cost effective, it has to be fast, and it has to talk to your other tech, right? And so if I could create the greatest mousetrap ever, but if it doesn't communicate with, Encompass, for example, or the hedging vendor that my company is using, then that's a problem. I remember many years ago, Dave Savage showed me, smartphones were kind of new, I think. They'd been around for a while. But he said, Rob, look at what we've created here on my phone. I'm going to show you. He pulled me aside, and I was still carrying my dial telephone under my arm wherever I went. Or my I watched Wall Street the other day on the airplane, and there's Michael Douglas with this huge, World War II like walkie-talkie device on the beach. Remember that scene? Mm-hmm. Anyway. So Dave's showing me this stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, this is already over my head. And Dave, at that point, and continually on, was like kind of ahead of the curve. And sometimes companies do get a little bit, quote, ahead of the curve, and then the rest of the industry catches up with them or leapfrogs them. It's really interesting what's going on with technology, but earlier this week, Rich, I did this write-up on Figure, and what they're doing in the capital markets. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, but it's some pretty interesting things. And I'd forgotten all about blockchain, and here Figure is bringing blockchain back in and using it in the capital markets. And so they claim that they can make things more efficient, more cost effective for lenders if you use their system. And it'll be interesting to see if other institutions try to catch up with that, or whether they just dismiss it as kind of a, just a one-off. And, nothing to see here. Let's move along. But the technology, you're always going to be better off if you're a loan officer knowing the technological tools that you have and being able to use them for your benefits, for your borrower's benefit, versus a loan officer who, still taking loan apps on a yellow pad of paper and then handing the information to their processor. So it's a obviously a continually evolving situation.
Jody, we're 2.5 years into a bear market, and mentioned kind of a precarious time for the mortgage industry. People just waiting, hurry up and wait, and your perspective, the traits of companies that you think are going to be most indicative of companies that are poised to grow market share these next couple of years.
So I always have felt this, and have always tried to, in running mortgage companies, tried to live by this. It's like you have to always live like you're poor. So those mortgage companies that were socking away money and letting the balance sheet grow in 2020 and 2021, instead of just, throwing money out because it was there and available, creating that culture, I think, lends to companies that will be successful in this market and going forward, and being able to survive, because you're constantly living like you're not going to get your next meal, right? And every single dollar is being socked away and put back in to the business. But I also think that the slower time, those who are taking the slower times, whether it be from a loan officer perspective to get to build deeper relationships with their referral partners, and who aren't just like, I heard the other day, well, you're not making the phone ring. Like, the only thing that makes the phone ring is like a 1.5% dip in interest rates. And then guess what? Someone's going to pull their credit, and then someone else is going to be calling them, because you're you're already too late if you're waiting for the phone to ring, right? So, though, and not just on the loan officer side, but for those operators who have taken the time to get a deeper relationship with their vendor partners, and get their vendors and their tech companies working together to solve problems as a group, as opposed to solve one problem here, solve one problem there, are going to be further ahead than others. And also those who have been able to stick the finger where the leakage is. And that has to do with, evaluating where you are currently, seeing where the leakage is, stop the leakage, and continuing to build your infrastructure so that you can grow once we do see those dips and the inclines and applications. Who's the grittiest?
Yeah, no, you're right. I could not agree more with every word of that. So, Rob, Rohit Chopra has been in the news a lot recently, with the November election looming, and the prospect of, everything he's built for the last 3 years, just, being handed over to Trump handlers playing paper football in the CFPB headquarters for 4 years. But first going after the credit reporting agencies for junk fee hikes. And then yesterday, made some big headlines when he proposed removing medical debt from credit reports. Your thoughts on Mr. Chopra's comments as of late?
Well. I had some comments about it in my commentary. It was actually the day before yesterday, I think. And some of them, the comments that I published were kind of old school mortgage bankers, like, what the heck? One of the quotes, Rich, have you ever seen that story about 17 inches? the speaker who shows up at an event with home plate around his neck.
Mhm.
Have you
No.
heard that story?
Uh-uh.
Oh, maybe I'll put that in my commentary this Saturday. But he's basically saying, just because, this 17 inches that's home plate, we don't vary the size of home plate based on the skill of the batter or the pitcher playing the game. It is what it is, and we deal with it. And if you're not good enough to hit the ball in the strike zone, then you're not going to play baseball. If you're a pitcher and can't get it over the strike zone, you're not going to pitch. Plain and simple. So there was somebody who went off on that tangent on that news saying, what borrowers, when you're getting a loan, you want to see if you're having you need to show the ability to repay, and investors want to see the whole picture for these loans, then that's part of the whole picture. But then I received several emails from loan officers saying, I've lost track of how many times, the borrowers thought they paid off their medical debt years ago, and here it pops up again, and it shouldn't be on there. And suddenly the borrower has to go down this trail of clearing up this, what they thought was long extinguished debt that turns out it wasn't, that was paid off, but the medical collection, whatever company, didn't show it paid off. It was just a nightmare. And so there's definitely a audience out there, a group out there says, good, we don't want to see this because it's more hassle than it's worth in terms of the credit profile. But like I said, there's definitely a school of thought that says we should include everything, and let's move on. So we'll
This
see
is the
what.
Oh, go ahead. No, this is the big picture. I'm Rich Swerbinski with Onward and Upward Consulting. We're pleased this week to be joined by Jodi Hall of Danda Road Consulting. A few minutes left with Jodi. Any last questions, comments? Rob, your hand is up.
So Jodi, what is Rich just skims over the name of your new company, and how do people find out about your new consulting gig?
They just email me is probably the easiest way, or they look out for me on one of Onward and Upwards shows. No, you can reach me on LinkedIn is the easiest way. We have a website going under design, and then my email is jodi@dandaroad.com. Danda's for the D is for data, and is spelled out, A is for analytics, and road is the N for, and it is the opportunity for infinite possibilities.
There you go. I thought Rich was saying Vanderpump, like Jodi at vanderpump.com. I'm like,
Jodi, I was going through your LinkedIn profile for the first time in evidently a few months, just prepping for the show. And it's so cool what you have there. Jodi's basic stated goal now in the mortgage industry is to try to, share knowledge and wisdom she has with the mortgage lending community, and to try to make an impact that way, which she's doing and can do better than anybody I know. But so she can drink bourbon on the front stoop of her new cabin in the woods that she constructed during the pandemic. So I thought that was awesome.
Yeah. No, I definitely am passionate about the industry, and, more so than just saying what you're passionate about, it's about doing what you're passionate about. And I'm all for less talk, more action, and, definitely looking to be out there and helping lenders navigate waters, but also helping technology companies solve problems for this industry, and also growing the leaders who will carry that passion on. When I'm sitting on the front porch of the barn in a rocking chair drinking bourbon, not the cabin, Rich.
Yeah, but I like to call it the cabin in the woods. It's more marketing appeal. So, Jodi, your thoughts? Any thoughts on Mr. Chopra's comments about the CRAs and medical debt?
No, I definitely, we've been talking about this for 2 years. So I'm glad that it's been brought to light. We've said that more competition will definitely lead to lower fees. And I think that that's going to have to be with a new scoring model, and less CFPB puts their foot down. But I do have to argue with Rob a little bit on that. The home plate's 17 inches for everyone. when you look at LO comp and the way that brokers are treated with being able to give concessions based on the loan program is different than IMBs, and something that with MLOs that we have argued about, that if MLO is giving a price concession, that it eats into the lender's profitability, but if you're a broker, you can adjust your comp based on that. So that's the next one, I think, that is where the size of the home plate is different, whether you're a broker or you're a licensed mortgage loan officer. So I think that one is going to be next up for on CFPB's radar.
And I think Chopra actually made some comments about that last week. It's just something loose along the lines of that he's open to looking at and reviewing the LO comp rule. There's certainly a lot of elements to that are not in the spirit of giving customers the best deal, being able to take concessions to lower the rate, lower commission, lower, So yeah, agree with you there. So wrapping things up, some other stuff that has been in the news. Housing affordability continues to become a bigger issue with voters in poll after poll, and we're waiting on, I believe there's like 5 or 6 days left, if my calendar math is right. FHFA had 30 days from the end of the close period to weigh in on the Freddie Mac equity loan orgy. Jodi, I have to ask every guest about the Freddie Mac, the second mortgage thing. Your thoughts, for, against?
Again, competition. And so I think that Freddie has definitely positioned itself to be in the forefront, and then others follow. I don't like doing second mortgages. It's a lot of work. So if we could streamline the processes or the amount of data that goes into them, then, I'm all for it. But I haven't paid much attention, and being a recovering lender isn't something that I have had to weigh in on lately.
Rob, your safe and steady investment strategy, well and long documented on this show and others. You're not in the GameStop right now, I'm assuming, Rob?
Is that a company?
The meme stock bandwagon, Roaring Kitty. You're not following his updates, no.
Hello Kitty is probably more my speed.
What about Joey Chestnut Kobayashi?
That's
you're
big news there.
Yeah,
big
that's
news.
some big news. I mean,
a vegan sponsor.
Too funny. Jodi, what else? Your world, you're as dialed in as anybody I know. Anything else? Any parting words for the masses as we take the big picture home this week?
No, I think the biggest thing is like, if you want to grow, if you want to be in the business in 2025, then build your infrastructure today and try to skate towards the 5-year puck instead of the 2-month puck.
And Rob, I got to give you credit. The Celtics, your track record on predictions is pretty damn good. You called that one. They're just beating the snot out of Dallas.
Good team.
Yeah, it all kind of came together for him. Well, as always, a very entertaining show. Want to thank my co-host Rob. Want to thank Jodi Hall from Danda Road, and we threw her email into the chat, jodi@dandaroad.com. If anybody wants to learn more about what Jodi's got going on. Jodi, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Much appreciated. Great chatting with you.
And to all of you that joined us, thank you very much for making some time out of the week to join us. Once again, find us on YouTube, like and subscribe, and same with our podcast. Just search The Big Picture and you can find us. And this episode will be uploaded to both those mediums within the next hour or so. So until next week, have a great rest of the week, everyone. And we will see you.
Thanks, Jodi.
Take care, everyone. Thanks, Jodi.
Bye-bye.